Good evening, everyone. Today is November 2nd, 2021. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Cupertino City Council. Madam City Clerk, would you please conduct the roll call?
Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Way.
Here.
Councilmember Willie.
Here.
Vice Mayor Chow.
Here.
Mayor Paul.
And I'm here. Thank you very much, Madam City Clerk. Tonight we have a couple of ceremonial matters and proclamation items. Item number one is a presentation from United Against Hate, an initiative out of the Office of the Mayor of Berkeley. And I believe that we do have a representative from the Mayor's office. Yes.
Mayor Paul, I believe we have a study session first.
Oh, I apologize. I was going off of memory, which is, very perilous in pretty much every instance. So let's go ahead and conduct the study session with regard to, I believe it is SB9, is that correct, Mr. City Manager? Okay, excellent. And so we'll go ahead and bring this over to Pew Ghosh, our planning manager here, to present the presentation for the SB9 study session. Welcome, Pew.
Good evening, Council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start by sharing my screen here. Thank you for introducing the subject, Mr. Mayor. We are looking at standards and regulations that the city can impose related to SB9 projects. I'm just going to go quickly through my presentation. Just as background, SB9 is a 2021 bill which allows the ministerial approval of either a duplex on an existing single-family lot or allows the subdivision of a single-family lot into two, which is called an urban lot split, and then the development of a duplex on each of those two lots. There are certain criteria under which SB9 projects could be proposed. One of which is a reference to certain SB 35 criteria. SB 35 is a bill that was adopted in 2019. 2018. Essentially, those were listed on this screen, essentially that the land is not prime farmland, doesn't incorporate wetlands, is not within a state designated very high fire severity zone that is subject to limitations. It's not within a delineated earthquake fault zone, also subject to limitations. Not within a 100-year flood zone, subject to certain exceptions written into the law. Within a regulatory floodway, also subject to the same exceptions. Part of a conservation and natural resource plan or under a conservation easement. And also not include habitat for species that are protected under state and federal laws. Additionally, for both of those type of projects that I described earlier, there are certain criteria that must be met. You cannot demolish any BMR or rent-controlled units. It cannot be property that was occupied by tenants within the past 3 years. It's not on property that has been withdrawn from the rental market under the Ellis Act for the past 15 years, and not a property located in a historic district or a state historic resources inventory site or within county or local landmark or historic property or district. And so those are the exceptions under which SB9 can be proposed on properties that don't meet those requirements. For urban lot splits, additionally, there are certain other criteria. You cannot propose an urban lot split on a parcel that was created through the use of SB9. You cannot, neither the owner of the parcel that is proposed for subdivision nor any person acting in concert with the owner has previously subdivided an adjacent parcel using an urban lot split. So essentially, you can't have a developer going through and subdividing all the lots within a block. Their lots created must be limited to residential uses only, and applicants must sign an affidavit stating that they intend to occupy at least one of the units as a principal residence for a minimum of 3 years after the lot split. So moving on to what regulations the city can propose with regard to SB9. There are certain limitations under SB9. We can adopt zoning and design review standards as long as we do not have regulations or standards that would prevent at least 800 square foot units on the lot, 4-foot side and rear setbacks. We can only require 1 parking space per unit. unless it is within half a mile walking distance of either high-quality transit corridor or a major transit stop, or if there is a car share vehicle within 1 block of the project, and no more than 25% of the exterior walls of an existing unit may be impacted. So next, we're going to go through a set of standards that the city does have certain discretion over, and we're looking for council's feedback on these items. For one thing, with regard to floor area ratio, I'm sorry, before I do that, there's certain restrictions in SB 9 about lot splits as well. And so we can adopt objective subdivision standards as long as they don't conflict with the standards in SB 9, which is that the new lots must be 40 to 60% of the original lot. Each new lot has to be at least 1,200 square feet. And the following cannot be required as conditions of approval of the subdivision, which is offsite improvements or the correction of existing non-conforming conditions. And now moving on to the areas where we wish to get council's direction on. As mentioned before, we have to allow at least 800 square foot units on the property, so 2 units, 800 square foot each. Maybe one of the ways to kind of allow additional square footage would be to impose certain regulations, and as long as projects meet those regulations, they're allowed additional floor area. I just wanted to remind the council that our current R1 floor area ratio is 45%, and that our RHS floor area ratio is 45% up to a 6,500 square foot maximum. And that maximum is reduced by a slope reduction factor that is dependent on how much your property is sloped above 10%. So there's a reduction for every percent of increase in slope over 10%. And then council could additionally consider higher or lower FAR based on that understanding, subject to legal constraints. With regard to second story setbacks, we're of course limited to the 4-foot side and rear setbacks, whether that's a single story structure or 2-story structure. If a 4-foot setback is proposed, council could adopt objective privacy standards, things like, if you're at a 4-foot setback, through a 10-foot setback, you've got to have opaque or unopenable windows, or your sill height must be greater than 5 feet. But if your setback is 10 feet or more, you could have regular windows. Of course, we would continue to require privacy protection and or shrubs as allowed by the current R1 requirements, whether you're an R1 property or an RHS property. That is something for council to consider as well. This is second story balconies and decks have long been a subject of discussion. This is entirely at the city's discretion. Options regarding SB 9 projects include disallowing balconies altogether, allowing balconies as long as they're much larger setbacks than what we currently allow under regular R1 ordinance or RHS ordinance, limit balconies only to front yards that front public streets or other front yards, or limit balconies to larger lots, which are greater, could be greater than 5,000 square feet, wider than 50 feet, whatever the council wishes to see. Or one of the issues we had recently seen was where there was a balcony proposed on a property that was 5 foot higher than the adjacent property. So those are all options for the council to provide direction on. With regard to parking, of course, as mentioned before, only 1 space per unit is allowed. Subject to limitations, that is, you can't require any at all if it is within half-mile walking distance of certain transit amenities, or if there's a car share on the block. However, if somebody does choose to provide parking, we could require that parking to be in an enclosed space of the size that accommodates our standards for 1-car parking. If additional spaces are proposed, we would definitely and we could require that the city's existing objective parking space standards be applied to the project. That is something that the city could look into doing. Another issue is with basements, with a large number of potentially smaller lots. It is at the city's discretion to allow or disallow the basements. These are expensive to build because you are hauling out dirt and putting in a lot of concrete in order to hold the dirt up. And then there are additionally environmental impacts from having basements. So the options, there are, of course, multiple options, some of which include disallowing basements on SB 9 projects. maybe counting that floor area toward the floor area of the site, or allowing it on larger lots with larger setbacks and small light wells, for example. Design standards, this is really about the architectural look of the buildings. I spent a lot of time just as I walk and drive through the city, what looks good, what doesn't look good. Examples of objective design standards could be, all structures shall have 6-inch siding. All roofing must be a certain pitch. All windows shall have a minimum 3.5 foot wide trim around them, or at least be inset 3 inches. Allow one entry feature to face the street, so it doesn't look entirely like a duplex, even if a duplex is proposed. In the RHS zoning standard, the concerns are around several lots that are on steep slopes. And so one of the suggestions that staff has that grading and the size of units be limited there, particularly due to concerns with landslides. We've had those in the past in our hills. So ideas include limiting development close to existing driveways, requiring driveways to be shared, limiting the size of units by potentially prorating them to the size of the new lots. So for example, if the original lot was allowed 6,500 square feet with no slope reduction, the new lots would be split in the same ratio to allow that potentially. Follow the existing, of course, there are existing objective standards in the RHS ordinance related to grading, massing, following contours, reflectivity values, etc., and disallowing development on the ridge line. So there are, those standards could still be required and imposed on SB9 projects. Moving on to subdivision. We think that subdivision should consider different lot shapes within the city, and I just wanted to identify how we look at lots. We have the regular old interior lots, which is just any old regular rectangular lot that fronts the street. You have a cul-de-sac lot, which is pie shape essentially, could have more than 4 property lines. You also might have a pie-shaped lot, which isn't necessarily a cul-de-sac, but like at a street corner. And then you have a corner lot, which fronts to streets. And then you have flag lots, which essentially look like a flag with access through the flagpole portion of the lot. So just moving on to how subdivision, getting council's feedback on how subdivision should occur. We do have strategies in our general plan which essentially disallow flag lots, except if they are the sole alternative to integrate the subdivision within the surrounding neighborhood, meaning that if you don't have existing flag lots around you, your subdivision may not be in a flag lot subdivision. You have to have side-by-side subdivision. Particularly in Cupertino, some neighborhoods have no flag lots. And these are in North and South Blaney neighborhoods, the Rancho Rinconada neighborhood. So there's several neighborhoods that currently have almost no flag lots. And so the question really is, should we allow narrow lots with street frontage, or should we allow flag lots, but the homes at the back would be completely disconnected from the street and the public realm? So that's the first question. The second question is, should we require shared driveways? We do have policies regarding minimizing the number and width of driveway openings in our general plan. So if you didn't share driveways, you would have driveways that sort of look like the pink in this diagram, versus if you were required to share driveways, you would potentially have fewer driveways that front, and that would be better for pedestrian bicycle safety. Subdivision for flag lots. This is an interesting one. Should we keep the orientation same? For example, in an existing condition, if you had a flag lot that was going to be subdivided, your fronts would, the front for the flag lot would front the rear of a standard interior or corner lot. If the subdivision occurred to keep the orientation the same, you would have the same orientation for the front to rear of the existing and the proposed. However, if we were to require the front of each of the 2 new lots to be fronting the, facing the street or oriented to the street, there would be less buildable building pads, and there might be more impacts because you're creating more of a front to rear situation in this case. So this is just another question for council about what they wish to see with existing flag lot subdivision. Moving on to Hillside Subdivision, we have many policies and goals and strategies about preservation of the natural environment in hillsides. There, as I mentioned before, there's steep slopes, there's sometimes very long driveways. Questions for council include, should we require a common driveway? Have to share the driveway so that there isn't new grading and things like that for existing property. Should we prorate the grading quantities, which makes sense to do? Should we require development on the flattest part of the site, that is close to the driveway, in order to ensure that there isn't additional grading on the site? Should we? So those are the kinds of things that we're looking for feedback from council on subdivision of RHS homes, RHS property. With regard to ADUs, SB 9 authorizes the council to prohibit ADUs and JADUs on parcels where there has been a lot split and 2 duplexes have been constructed. The council could consider including this prohibition in the urgency ordinance or interim ordinance that they might adopt. With regard to the approval process, as mentioned in SB 9, this is a ministerial process. As long as people meet the requirements, they get their approval. There are no public hearings that can be required. A question for council could be, that the council could consider is, does it wish to include notification? And when that notification should it occur before or after approval? Though I did want to let the council know there is no recourse in terms of the project because it is a ministerial project and has to be under SB 9. So here's a table that I put together that kind of goes over what the process is for non-SB 9 projects, which are current and future projects, and then SB 9 projects that could, how that process could change based on SB 9. And I put together the differences. And so, one of the main decision points for council is, or direction points is, does council wish to incorporate noticing and when that noticing should occur? Next steps is to receive the comments from the city council and then to introduce an urgency ordinance for the council to consider on December 7th. With that, I conclude my presentation.
Great, thank you, Pew. Let me see if any members of the public want to speak to this item before I bring it to council, since we have the constraint of a study session. So I do see that we have 4 hands raised, Paul Soto, Peggy Griffin, Jennifer Griffin, and Lisa Warren. So members of the public, you'll each have up to 3 minutes to speak on this item. As soon as the first speaker is done speaking, that will close off the hands and availabilities to put yourself into the line. And so Paul Soto, you'll be our first speaker. Welcome, Paul.
Good evening, council members. My name is Paul Soto from the Horseshoe, which is the Gardner area that borders like Bird, Virginia, going towards the downtown up to Willow Street. And so I'm from that area. Been a Santa Clara County resident for 100 years plus. So one of the issues that doesn't come up with respect to talking about housing ordinances and mandates and bills is the perspective of redlining and how the generation to be able to, when we're looking at land use policy, that we're able to take on a perspective that accounts for that generational impact, because we're feeling it now, we're seeing it now. We just don't necessarily have the language to articulate it specifically and clearly without arousing the racist intentions, without arousing those racist tensions that created those policies in the first place. And so I think that until we get to a point where we can start discussing how those policies are still, it's a disease. It has infected policy, and we don't know how to articulate it because we don't necessarily know what we're looking at. And some of us do this innocently and naively, but I would also venture to state that there are some that don't do it unknowingly or naively. It is still calculated. and it's embedded in the policy. So unless we get to a point where we can articulate what it looks like and then see how our current policies are infected with it, we'll never get to a point where equity actually has a concrete manifestation versus just having an intellectual argument about it or intellectual debate and it being nothing but abstract thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And our remaining speakers are, as before, Peggy Griffin, followed by Jennifer Griffin, followed by Lisa Warren. Welcome, Peggy.
Good evening, council and staff. I really do appreciate this study session and hopefully the additional ones. A couple comments. I say put in all the standards that you can. Second stories, the high sills, the opaque glass, etc. If you can do a setback from the 4 feet, I didn't follow that very well, but that would be good. Parking, shared driveways. I grew up in a duplex area where we had shared driveways and it seemed to work okay. Basements, I'm concerned if you are so close to the fence line and someone digs a basement, can they impact your land and cause, things to sink? So I'm not sure about basements. I would disallow balconies. Balconies as it is, with all the space we have, cause problems. So if you're going to stack everybody together, balconies just add problems. And this is a legal question. Due to the limited amount of time in order to make all the necessary changes before January 1st, 2022, should the city issue a memorandum of understanding describing what it plans to do regarding making these changes to include the objective standards so that if you can't get everything done now, that you're covered? I'd like to hear the answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Our next speaker is Jennifer Griffin, followed by Lisa Warren. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor Darcy. I'm really glad you all are having this study session on SB9. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm just going to use these SB9 and SB10 are two of the biggest baloney bills that have ever been made. I am absolutely appalled that our legislatures and our governor have been used by special interests. Money that is coming in and is funding YIMBY. We know who the money is coming from, but we draw the line when you exclude the public. I would never have bought my house if I had known that someone next door could subdivide the properties and make them 1,200 square feet. I sacrificed to buy this property. And YIMBY likes to think that everybody's making $500,000 a year. I'm sorry, I bought this as a single female, and I was a programmer, I was a tech worker, and it was not fun. I'm not driving a Jaguar. I mean, I don't understand why everyone thinks that you have to have everything at 21 years old. That is not the way that it works. I think that Cupertino should file a vote of no confidence against the state, against the governor, against our local legislators who voted on this travesty. I spent the weekend in Portland talking to my relatives who are being subjected to HB 2001, which is the equivalent of SB 9, 2 to 4 per lot. My relatives are scared that other neighborhoods are going to be cut up into 2 to 4. It's the poorer neighborhoods. The neighborhoods of Portland that are not by Reed College are going to be subjected to this. My other question is, what about utilities? My mother's house on a 1920 lot in Aptos has 2 sewer lines from 3 adjacent properties going across the back of her property. How in the world do you subdivide that? My aunt had a house in Santa Cruz Mountains, and the back of the lot collapsed in 1981 and almost covered the house. What securities do we have that we're not going to do this? This is the most blindly stupid 2 bills. In fact, I'm echoing what one of the city council members in Salem said when they had HB 2001. These are the stupidest bills I have ever heard of. I am appalled that our state is being subject to this. I have 28 seconds. Okay, I live a quarter mile from the bus stop. Okay, 23 is bus stop 23, bus line 23. Is that a high frequency? I can't walk a half mile. This is insulting. It's offensive, and it makes me sound like my great grandparents who were Irish and were suffering from Protestant and Catholic, that they were stupid enough to buy homes. Now, this is where we're going to start off.
I'm going to have to cut you off here. So next is Lisa Warren. Welcome, Lisa. You're also the final speaker.
Thank you. So similar comments to Peggy's, anything and everything we can do to make this less offensive and annoying. I do believe noticing of some kind has to happen. You can't just have that go away. Basements, no, not allowed. Balconies, no, not allowed. I missed something. I came in mid-slides, but second story setbacks, I feel like they're not even required with a 4-foot setback and then no second story setback. That's something the city got away with a long time ago for multiple reasons. And actually recently I've seen new construction with no second story setbacks on some planes, and I'm not understanding that at all. That's a whole nother subject, but we need second story setbacks if they aren't here, and you can do that. And I'm sorry if I misunderstood the slide. Privacy plantings, once again, one of my pet peeves. Our current municipal code is so poorly designed for that. It might have been fine back in the day. It's not fine currently, and it certainly won't be fine with these kind of development. And I wonder about solar protection, which is another reason for, I don't know if you can just not allow a second story. I don't know what it is, but solar protection is going to be a huge problem. Everyone building something new housing is going to be required to have solar panels. And if the sun can't get to them, how does that work? And I don't think the state even considered that in any of these things. So that's it in a nutshell, I guess. I too appreciate this happening. Again, I missed the beginning. I was rescuing my husband from a car that wouldn't start. I don't know what the first few slides addressed, and I will try to go back and look at them myself, but if they're talked about again later, that would be great. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Lisa. Well, thank you for all of the comments from the public. Let's bring this back to City Council for any follow-ups, questions, or discussion. The request from city staff in bringing forward this study session is to have council provide direction for next steps. And so I'll go ahead and start with any raised hands from our City Council. First, we have Councilmember Willie.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So are we limited to the 5 minutes?
Well, let's take a look at where we're at. We're at 6 minutes. Thank you for reminding me about the time. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll allocate 5 minutes for each of the council members.
Okay, so some questions for you. I'll try and make it quick so she can then answer. I'm confused a little bit about that FAR slide. You know, if a lot currently allows 25 or 45%, and in the new where they do the lot split, are they now going to be still adhering to the 45%? 45% of the total is the same as 45% of 2 halves. Is that truly the case, or are they going to be able to go larger?
So I can try to explain, and then maybe Chris can help with the legal limitations that the council might have on floor area. There are certain lots in there are certain lots that might be smaller than, for example, 5,000 square feet. And if those are subdivided to 2,500 square feet, then allowing 1,600 square foot on it as a minimum because we have to allow that per state law. The FAR would be greater than 45%. Right, so 45% of 2,500 is certainly smaller than 1,600, for example.
So a 5,000 square foot lot, the combined total would be 45%.
No, it would have to be 3,200 square feet for a 5,000 square foot lot because we have to allow 4 800 square foot units if subdivided.
I'm still confused, but I need to press on. One of the slides said, it appears to me, maximum for an existing structure, the maximum disturbance of the existing structure is limited to 25%?
Correct.
So if you have a structure on a lot that's in the center, so to speak, you decide to do the lot split, there's no way to separate that. I mean, your pictures that you were showing were all showing unique structures on all the sub pieces of the parcel, but I don't understand why this says you can only disturb 25% of the existing structure.
Right, so if the city did not adopt objective standards and if we had to apply the state standards on subdivision, which is there are no standards, you could subdivide any way you wish. And if somebody subdivided it and only wished to, but just wanted to subdivide it, they could only disturb up to 25% of the existing walls of the structure.
Yeah, I think that's really confusing. I don't think we have time for you to explain it to me, but I think we do need some real good clarification on that. The parking and it sounds like we're able to say we can stick to the current standard in Cupertino. If somebody builds a brand new house in Cupertino, they have to have a 2-car enclosed garage. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so now say, okay, somebody's going to come in and somehow the structure doesn't exist, so they're going to put up 2 structures, do a lot split. You know, to be consistent with the landscape in Cupertino, each of those substructures should, I think, have to have a 1-car covered carport or covered garage that essentially would keep the character of the community, as opposed to, let's say, 4plexes. It's all just a top on top of the exposed automobiles. Totally different character than, you know, a neighborhood. I'll go ahead and pass at this time, but boy, those are some pretty glaring things that have to be detailed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Willie. There's a minute left of your time, and now we have, I don't see further hands raised. Vice Mayor Chow.
So first procedural question. One public comment mentioned the memorandum of understanding. My understanding is we are planning to pass an urgency ordinance instead. I spoke to Chris and he said that this is actually a stronger method to regulate rather than memorandum of understanding. So I'd like a confirmation on that. And then in addition, also in case we say we permit flag lot or we say, or we didn't say anything on the flag lot, but we change our mind next year, can we still adopt another ordinance to say, okay, we would like to disallow flag lot or allow? I don't know. So what would be the procedure? So maybe I understand that, say, a new one, maybe it's adopted next June. Maybe it would be applicable only for projects proposed after that. Thank you.
I believe if the city adopts an urgency ordinance, there will be a follow-up regular ordinance after that, and the city can adopt any new regulations it wishes to adopt or change its regulations at that time. And Chris can, the city attorney can also help answer.
Yeah, sorry, I tried, and of course I was muted. So just on the second question, taking the second question first, yes, we could change the lot standards subject to constraints on reducing density, which we'd have to avoid. With respect to the first question, an MOU would not be an ordinance. There is an argument that it doesn't necessarily carry the force of law. The urgency ordinance would carry the force of law and adopt enforceable objective development standards. So it's my opinion that that's the strongest, most defensible approach the city could take, given the time constraints in putting the ordinance together and enacting it.
Mm-hmm. So our plan is to adopt urgency ordinance in December. That will be enacted immediately, and then maybe adopt a permanent one in, say, March. And then just in case we want to change it, we could have a revised ordinance like in June, right?
Yeah, so the interim urgent ordinance initially is 45 days and then can be extended up to a year. So that would give us, really the entirety of next year to go back through the full process, get planning commission input and adopt and council input and adopt a permanent ordinance. And so that's the intent.
Oh, that's great. Because for issues like flag lot, I'm not sure. I don't think that might be an issue, but when talking to planning staff, that some residents might just not like that kind of layout. So maybe we need more input from people. That's good to know. We could still get more public input next year. And then for sure, I think the intent is, if I would like to say, maybe for streamlining project, we want to have tighter standards on issues where that might have concerns like balcony, basement, because there might be subterranean issues that a streamlining process might not be able to take care of. So, but then on the other hand, I do think duplex, even lot split, preferably duplex, is a good way to add units in Cupertino that has the minimal impact on the outlook of the community. So if we can adopt a way so that projects going through the ministerial process have to adhere to this standard. However, if you would like more flexibility, we encourage you to go through discretionary approval of duplex and lot split so that there are a dual process. That's what I hope to see.
30 seconds, Ms. Mayor.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So.
Okay, next we have Councilmember Wade.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Paul. So my question is, we could adopt emergency ordinance and then work on it next year. So if we say no flag lot, but to have that sort of prevents a lot from being split because the in front is narrow, then that doesn't apply or is invalid. How do we interpret that?
Yeah, so we can't adopt standards that have the effect of precluding a subdivision or a development under this chapter. So we would have to have a process for resolving conflicts. And there's certain lots that may be very narrow and so difficult to split lengthwise. And so that's something that I think we're thinking about and we need to address in the objective standards.
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, can I follow up with a question? So does it mean that even we adopt a strict or say an ordinance, but because of a lot that cannot conform to it, if conforms to it, they cannot even split it, then is that a special case they can appear, or the planning division can have authorization to streamline and subdivide it to a flag lot? How does that work?
So their basic minimum requirements in SB9, and basically you have to allow a subdivision so long as both of the parcels are 1,200 square feet or more, and there's certain restrictions on the relative size. They have to be roughly equal size, and there are other restrictions as well. And then you have then as far as the development, you have to allow 2 800 square foot units on each of those parcels. And so we can't adopt objective standards that conflict with those minimum requirements. And so we're going to try to develop objective standards that in all, or at least the vast majority of cases, will allow that minimum development to take place. And then, if there's sufficient size, allow development really up to basically the footprint, the size, at least the size of the footprint that's allowed under existing zoning standards. At least that is what staff is proposing for council's input.
Okay.
If there were a conflict between those standards and state law would prevail. But we're trying to avoid that conflict by carefully developing our own local objective standards.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember Wei. Councilmember Wei, you have approximately 2 minutes left, a little bit less. Councilmember Moore.
Hey, thank you, Mayor Paul. So I'm a little confused about what we need to direct staff for the December urgency ordinance. For instance, are you looking for us to say that we want to adopt objective privacy standards, opaque, unopenable windows, sill height greater than 5 feet? Do we want to disallow balconies, require parking to be an enclosed space, and disallow basements? Are you looking for those types, that kind of direction? Okay, so, and we're not going to get a second chance at this before the December meeting, is that right? Because it would have been a little bit easier for me, kind of menu style, if we had a table for each one of these requirements. So for balcony, it was like you can have it be this, these are your different ways that you could run it through. But for me, when I go through the list, I'm just more inclined to go, since we're going to go look at this again, let's go as strict as possible at the first get-go, because that's the easiest way for me to think it through. And then we can go back and loosen up those standards as we see. And I don't think with the amount of time we have, 30 more minutes, I can't come up with any kind of design standards, the 6-inch siding or stucco or 3-inch window framing. I can't get that detailed. It's just not going to happen. So that would be something that would probably have to go into next year. There was one bit of information I would love to have, and this is from the Turner Center, and they studied SB9 and said there were 40,000 market feasible units from SB9 for Santa Clara County. I would like to know what percentage of those or what number they were thinking would happen within Cupertino. If someone on staff is able to get that information. I hunted all over for it, couldn't find it. So the suggestions that I just made, those are what I would like to see go into that urgency ordinance. And there might be some more in the list that we could add on, but that's mine for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore. You're at about 3 minutes, a little bit less. And Vice Mayor Chow, your hand is raised again. You only have about 20 seconds remaining. I'll cede over a couple of minutes of my time if you wanted to make some follow-ups at this point.
Thank you so much. So I'm guessing the staff needs some direction. For example, do we want to allow or disallow ADU, JADU on the SB9 project? On some big items like those, maybe we should at least give direction. And another comment is shared driveways. I think it's nice to be able to divide evenly. However, if having separate driveways would not allow a space of parking on street, then maybe we should encourage shared driveway, because we want to preserve as much on-street parking as possible, because we know that SB9 project does not require parking, especially in areas that's within half mile of public transit. So I would like to see how do we encourage or require shared driveway, especially for narrow lots that would only have one front. The frontage would allow maybe only one parking.
We could definitely include objective standards that require shared driveways in circumstances where it's appropriate. For example, if there are narrow lots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Vice Mayor Chow. And then I do see hands raised again from Councilmember Smore, Way, and Willie. And so let's go in that order. I believe that was the order in which the hands were raised. Councilmember Moore, as I stated before, you have a little less than 3 minutes left. Okay,
Mayor Paul, this is kind of a process question. How are we going to come to an agreement about what we want to go into this ordinance, the urgency ordinance? And I am agreeing with the Vice Mayor, if I'm understanding correctly, and I would, for the time being, like to see a prohibition on the ADUs and JADUs at this time. So I don't know what we could add in regarding the driveway. I guess we could require a common driveway as a suggestion for it, but I can't get detailed enough at this point. It's too much too fast. But what's your suggestions for how we proceed to get to an agreement between the five of us?
Yeah, let me stop your time and just start mine back up, since I think that nicely segues into a comment that I was going to make. I was sitting in on a West Valley mayors and managers meeting with Dave Cortese, Senator Dave Cortese, representing us in some of the other West Valley jurisdictions. Interim City Manager Larson was there last week as well. And he was telling us a lot about the things that we could do with regard to SB9. And he was trying to, give reassurances that we actually have a very broad latitude and a fair amount of discretion. Mayor Gibbons from Campbell, mentioned that their experience thus far had been they had started looking at it, and almost before, in fact, they started the meeting, they had gotten threatened with litigation from an outside nonprofit organization. And so I think that if there is that kind of a sense of it from our state senator, that our staff should work with Senator Cortese's office to find out where that discretion is. The comment that I made in that meeting was, because Senator Cortese invited comments as to what else we needed collectively from the West Valley mayors. And I said, look, I think there are 3 things that we need. And this wasn't, specific to various objective standards, but, I think very pertinent, we need to end the posturing, okay? We need to eliminate the litigation as an extension of, eliminating the posturing. And then we also need to try to end the profiteering at the end of the day. I mean, because a lot of this is being driven by factors that are not really geared towards trying to solve the problems that they're putatively trying to solve. So, I think if we can do those things and we can work with our state Senate's office, because, the senator has expressed, willingness to work with us and the opinion that we have a broad range of latitude, then I think we should. I would suggest in answering your question squarely, Councilmember Moore, that we go ahead and take all of the suggestions, consolidated from all of the council members here this evening, and ask staff to follow up on those, to the extent that we can objectively add requirements there within what staff believes and our city attorney, of course, believes is within our allowance, and also work with the senator's office to, see what other types of requirements we can be putting in there without going into, derogation of, what the state legislature is contemplating. So, I think that should be sufficient direction to staff. I've heard a number of suggestions from, council tonight But I also think that our staff has follow-up homework to do as well. My understanding is that our city council is being fairly careful about this. Not all councils are looking at this and going, hey, this is a massive sea change. But as we go in our city, we're very careful. We have excellent long-term results. I think the points that we bring up are legitimate, and so I feel okay with this exercise. I would prefer to have not done this as an emergency ordinance, but I think doing it the regular fashion was really a bit of a constrained timetable that was really imposed upon us by a fairly accelerated timetable, which frankly might not even turn out to be all that useful with regard to getting all of this implemented well. So those are my comments on it. That pretty much expires my time. I had ceded over a minute of my time to Vice Mayor Chow as well. So Councilmember Moore, did you want to follow up on that? Otherwise, if not, I will go ahead and call on Councilmember Way and then Councilmember Willie.
Mayor Paul, how much time do I have?
You have approximately 2 minutes left. Okay.
Well, if you had more to say, I'll cede you the 2 minutes. But I've already quickly stated as much as I could come up with. I am a little bit concerned about the lack of permeable surfaces with regards to groundwater recharge and what impact this is going to have. And I don't want to see that we have the lots are pretty much completely covered over, and then there's pavement or concrete put on the surfaces and a concrete driveway, and at the end of the project, you don't have any actual pervious areas. So I am concerned about that, and we've already spoken about the issues with infrastructure. But if you have more to say, I'd be really interested to hear it.
Well, I would just invite you to second a motion that I'll bring forward after everyone has brought forward their substantive comments with regard to what they would like staff to look into, or potentially add to the requirements here under the allowances that SB 9 writes into the law itself. I'm of the opinion that if the state legislature invites us to work with them, that we should be working with them, and that we shouldn't be banding about in fear that our legitimate points are being punted around by what essentially amounts to profit mongering, trickled down to the effect of basically upending the democratic process. I think these are very legitimate concerns that we're putting forward, and I think everyone knows the political line by which this occurred. There was an effort to bring more inventory into California for housing, deriving from the Brown administration gubernatorially. And, I see this basically as the ultimate extension of that. But I think that, the state lawmakers, or at least the ones that represent us, are willing to work with us in terms of trying to represent our interests. I have no reason to think, and, Greg, correct me if you got a different impression, but I have no reason to think that our state lawmakers and representatives are trying to play a game of gotcha with us. And, I directly asked, hey, if we're trying to have a reasonable conversation, it is actually quite unreasonable to, take people that are having a good faith conversation about their jurisdiction and trying to, enhance the implementability of these requirements. Sorry, Councilmember Moore, I used all your time. So I'm going to go ahead and call on Councilmember Way, followed by Councilmember Woolley. Councilmember Way, you have approximately a couple minutes left. Okay. Councilmember Woolley, you're right at 1 minute.
Got it. This will be quick. So Mayor Paul, I agree with you. I think we're not the only city who is looking at SB 9. So maybe we could really collaborate under, our state representative and work on this together with the other cities, so that we are not the only ones who are studying this. That's my first comment. My second comment is I think the most strict ones may not be the most beneficial ones. For example, we can say everybody has shared driveways, but driveways are a great place to park cars. So that would minimize the street parking. So I think our staff is experienced. Maybe they could come up with options or standards that could fit into different lot size or things like that. Building is not one size fits all. So I'm going to trust the staff to provide us with good options on how do we implement these objective standards.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Way. And Councilmember Willie?
Okay, so got a rush here. So I'd really like to have staff or our city attorney tell us what we can do about the 3-year occupancy requirement. I feel that's going to be a big way for developers to manipulate the system and not occupy. Number 2, little concerned about the 4-foot setbacks. You know, families, they have kids. We want them to be safe, go play in the backyard. It sounds like on the adjacent property, the structure can be 4 feet and straight up 2 stories, overlooking their kids playing in the yard. I'd like clarification on that. Number 3, I do like Councilman Moore's concept on a table. I think the next time we meet, we need a table with 3 columns. You know, give us 3 options, like balcony. No balcony, no limit on the balcony, or maybe 10 feet. And then we can go down it as a council and start circling whichever ones we want and maybe present those. Number 4.
Councilmember Willie, I just wanted to give you a general reminder that is your time. Councilmember Way, would you like to provide your remaining minute or so to Councilmember Willie to wrap up here? All right, Councilmember.
Sure.
So I would like us to make our final table, so to speak, with some sketches, you know, available to Senator Cortese, so he can see that we're trying to facilitate, but also to protect the neighborhoods to some degree. And I think we do need to work with him. And then the last one will be my previous questions, including the 4-foot one. I'd really like staff to get back to me on the true understanding of those questions. You know, the 25% structure disruption and those other questions. I don't think I can make a decision without knowing that. Yeah. And that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember Willie. I'll go ahead and make that motion. And so I'll motion that City Council directs staff to take our comments under this item under advisement and to return to us at a time when they bring forth the proposed emergency ordinance with all of the suggestions made by each of the council members with regard to specific potential objective standards, as well as work with our local state elected officials' offices to determine what other types of requirements we can place in and be within the confines of the permissions contemplated by State Bill 9 for this legislative session. So that's my motion. Would anyone like to second it? I see Councilmember Moore, you have your hand raised. Did you want to second this motion?
I do want to second it, and I do second it, but I am wondering if, I don't recall hearing a mention about the sloped lots. I think we had that in there, but I would like some suggested code for the sloped lots, because that's a little bit difficult to try to piece together on the fly.
Okay, I'll consider that specifically called out in my motion, but also note that with regard to any other requirements, those should be encompassed by the catch-all of working with our local elected senators' office to ensure that we're, putting in requirements that go to the limit of, but don't exceed the bounds permitted by SB 9. So, okay, staff, is that clear instruction? Did we give you enough to do between now and December 7th?
I think so. We just have to figure out a schedule where we can work with Senator Cortese's office and get you an emergency ordinance by December 7th.
Great, that sounds great. And anything else, either from our city manager or city attorney at this time?
No, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, great. Madam City Clerk, would you please conduct a roll call vote for the motion that's on the table?
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, we're at 6:31. That was the study session for, I should correct myself, when I was going off of my memory and admittedly perilous endeavor, I called this the regular meeting. That was in fact a special meeting of the City Council for November 2nd. We will adjourn this special meeting until 6:45, at which time our regular meeting will start for November 2nd, 2021. Thanks very much. We'll see you then.